Hey neighbors, the handyman here with Initiative Coffee Company, along with eminent heel turn Jake Del Maro, and today we're talking about DDAL 3-12, Hillsfar Reclaimed. Writers Cindy Moore, editors Claire Hoffman, Chris Tulach, and Travis Woodall. General notes: this is a 2-hour module for Tier 1 play, tuned for 5 third-level characters. Our heroes will need to infiltrate the city of Hillsfar to identify a demonic entity. This is a great module to lean into exploration. Part 1, Looking for Work. The party begins by navigating the sewers towards Hillsfar with the assistance of Ishtana. Encounters with the rat swarms may prove either trivial or deadly depending on your group, and you'll need to adjust accordingly. Our heroes eventually find a rat-devoured corpse of a wealthy male human. The party will have to assume false identities from altered disguise self-spells and climb into a privy in Hillsfar. Jake, start us off.
So first and foremost, I really enjoyed the thing you brought up. It's a really great way to not just have the combat or so and so. The espionage aspect of this mod is really interesting and fun. It kind of exists throughout. Not kind of, it does exist throughout, and maintaining that low, like, you don't want the limelight on you. You want to be like, the adventure, of course, is about your adventures, but
Right.
it's also not supposed to be about your adventures. It's like, hey, what are they hearing? What are they doing? How are they? They're doing the nitty gritty of the James Bond scenario. So when they when they first start out, of course, you're going from Elenil and the Hollow Tree out to the sewers to go into Hillsfar because of the great laws that are in place. Awesome backstory. They do a pretty good job throughout season 3, going through like exactly, in the descriptions here and there, they'll tell what exactly great laws are.
Mhm.
And if you haven't read those and this is just a pickup, essentially they don't like non-humans or I think elves are even like, Havils are like okay.
Yeah.
But they're like but everyone else is considered.
To clarify, they are titled the Great Laws of Humanity. That is not a value statement that Jake is making about that set of laws.
No, it's legit. That's what it's called. And I would say this is one of those aspects that is interesting because it's one of those first mods that you're entering the city. I mean, there's a couple other mods in season 3. Is like one where you're in the gladiator pit and stuff, but there's not really much to do in season 3 that you get to actually encounter the city. But back to the mod itself, looking at this rat swarm block, I mean, those can get nasty pretty quick.
If you're at the bottom end of the level range here, a rat swarm is not
fun.
Much less 4 of them. If you're at the top end, like, a rat swarm is pretty challenging, but not gonna be.
But it's multiple. It's the problem is it's not just one. There's multiple, and I would say if you're stuck on that 2-hour, if you're really hard pressed that 2 hours, even if you're not, I would just skip that because, or like let the players avoid being beaten up.
Yeah, unless you've got a table that's really interested in combat, right? It's possible that your party members are like super interested in combat, in which case, like, go for it. If you do that, remember that swarms have a 0. They don't have a 5-foot melee attack. They have a 0-foot melee attack.
And they have the halving too, which is which makes their hit points that much higher. I'll let them get creative. I mean, like, I'm not really for or against this combat. I don't think it really builds value.
It's not integral to the plot of the adventure.
It's thematic.
It's a good
more
place.
Than anything.
It's a good place to cut if you need to cut, or kind of find other ways around if you need to do that.
Other than that, I think that there's information to be gathered on the body that they find in the sewers. Once again, a good opportunity to like let your characters explore. It also is fun because it's people don't really look up in dungeons. No one looks up in sewers, but that's one of the things that will give a pretty. If the party looks up, they get actual idea of what's happening to some degree or another with it being like a privy. and like a nice one. So, and then you like kind of make the connection. This guy was like stuffed down into this thing, and then like every bone in his body's broken.
Yeah.
And other than that, I think Ishtana's a really cool character. She's sassy and she's also prim and proper. So I do enjoy that aspect. Other than that, as you said, you know, you have to go and like she's gonna give you info as you continue onward. Learn that there's members of the court, and how there might have been some sort of tampering. With that tampering being said, you have the First Lord is going to be traveling out of the city soon, and there's just general concern. So it's up to them to find out, you know, what's going on.
Yep.
Pretty easy, cool information gathering mission, and find out if there's corruption within his court itself. So, you know, part 1 I think is pretty straightforward and fun, and I would just continue going with that. And then when you get to you get to the end of part 1, I guess it would be, you know, have your characters describe what they're dressing up as. When we played it, our trickery cleric turned into a boy with a broom and like had his full identity. This is one of those times where you can hopefully draw in people that maybe are newer or people that might be a little more quiet, because like of course you're gonna have like somebody else, like maybe give them some ideas, maybe have some like, oh, you see somebody as you're getting closer or whatever does this, like they're going to be acting as staff for the you know, whatchamacallit, the ball.
And a good way to do that is to just keep asking questions from those characters, right? Like, what shoes are you wearing? Like, how tall are you? How old are you?
Yeah.
Just keep going. Yeah. Part 2, the interview. Our heroes infiltrate a party held by the First Lord of Hillsfar. The easiest way to do this is by posing as servants for the party. While the First Lord's Chamberlain processes the new hires, clues are available on her desk. If adventurers are made, they'll have to escape the tower and flee guards, as well as a mage. Jake, next step in this adventure.
Once again, as I said, you know, easiest way to go is go in as servants. You know, it's not. Once again, let people get creative. The guy, you can play up the Torgrave, because I think he comes up, if I remember correctly, later in Tier 2 adventures.
I think so.
I think he does. It's a little foggy.
The First Lords are recyclable in this season. They change out pretty aggressively and pretty quickly. So
it's almost like Rolemaster. It's like it's almost a death sentence when you become when the First Lord's made. I ask different questions. I think kind of like maybe even, you know, give examples like, oh, you see so and so in front of them if they're struggling for ideas. I don't think it's be that bad. I've never been in a situation or a table that I've run or played at that I've had where the characters fail and they've been chased off.
Yeah, I've never encountered that either.
Maybe that's a conversation you have with your table if that does in fact happen. Because fighting is not the way. Like they will die.
It's a tough fight. Yeah, it's not meant to be a fight. It's meant to be
a chase
away.
And if they decide to turn, I would say that is effectively the end of the adventure.
Yeah.
And like maybe if they're not getting that, you know, which I don't know why if they're sitting at your table and doing that, I don't know why. But if they're not getting that, you got to make that abundantly clear that weapons are not going to be tolerated here. Like fighting is not, like, you are here at a party and you are not to be, you know, disruptive.
Yeah, I mean, part of your job as a DM is to communicate those things. Occasionally you have a party that doesn't care, and I don't know.
Why are they playing
the game? But
yeah.
I guess be familiar enough with that chase scene.
And I almost would rather not you be familiar. I'm saying this as a for DM to anyone that's listening. Maybe don't familiarize yourself, because if that goes down, the mission's over.
Yeah.
Like that, in my eyes, the party's canceled because people are trying to. You have now become the infiltrators, and if anything, you've now solidified whatever's happening in his court.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, more of a not AL stance, but like to me, that's the series of events that happen, and I don't think that's even that far-fetched.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, there is stuff to find on her desk if the characters are perceptive enough, or on the desk against his schedule,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's some info that is requested upon.
And that's going to lead into the next adventure too.
Yeah. So, other than that, I think this could be a fun RP section or a section that determines whether your table is going to be playing the rest of this adventure.
Yep. Part 3, to serve. The party is set up as servants and need to blend in as they search for the demonic agent. This gives them the opportunity to explore the tower and search out the demon. Eventually, the First Lord makes a racist tirade that ends in an assassination attempt from the crowd and chaos. The First Lord's bride flees with his confidant, both demons in disguise. The party pursues and chases the demons while avoiding being waylaid by the red plume guards. Part 3 here.
How do you feel about this, Brian?
I am always frustrated at a module that claims to be plug and play and not part of a, like, one of the benefits of AL modules is like you're supposed to be able to just play one of the modules. And I'm always frustrated because there's like a get out of jail free expectation of these demons at the end of this combat. Like they're meant to escape.
Potentially.
Yeah, but I don't think that is good design. It's not satisfying design in a module that is intended to be able to be played independently. Sure. If you're running this as part of a series, I think it makes sense because you encounter these demons later. If you are running this independently, it's a pretty unsatisfying conclusion for your players.
I hear that. I absolutely hear that. This part of the mod is very interesting as it gives a lot of backstory to like the people that care about the First Lord and his counselors, and then like the blatant like, I know we as players see it, and then we as people see it. It's like this person's pulling the wool over your eyes.
Yeah.
But it's. I think this is the first time we have a succubus or an incubus.
Both. That's one of each.
That show up minus like I know there's some season 1 mods. I don't think there's any season 2 mods.
I don't think there's any succubi in season 1. There's
there
Cambion.
is
there?
It's a Cambion. That's what it was. So I do think that this is a very interesting choice of like characters and the clear manipulation that's going on, and the description that happens when like the whole transforming in terms of going into the combat is very cool because we haven't had that happen before.
Sure. Yeah.
And like I always play it almost like the red guards show up and they're like, oh my, like they're like, they're disgusted by, the flush tearing and all that's happening. So like, know your party, but I think that's a really fun thing to describe. Like they have not encountered this before, and it kind of reveals the issues within Hillsfar that they thought they so well had under control.
It also has the madness mechanic that is throughout season 3. I guess like I don't know that when we ran these mods you were particularly good about remembering the madness mechanics. I know in season 4 I was terrible about remembering the horror checks. So
the issue with the madness checks is that this is one of the last tier 1 mods where I tried my best keeping the madness checks going. However, the issue that kept running itself in was you could always just get lesser, or you get spellcasting services. And or there was a point where a few levels in, because of the AL rules, where you could get to X level of madness, but it was still like a DC 13 save. It wasn't necessarily, it didn't scale.
Sure.
And then when your cleric at the end of the adventure can cast Greater Restoration, and it wipes it down to 0 again, it was kind of like oh
It
you've got
doesn't feel
one
like a
second of
consequence.
madness.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
like
suppose that's kind of a complaint of the overall design
I
of
think it's a
those
symptom
spells. Yeah, like
of AL. Like in a homebrew campaign, you can't just be like, and you're like monitoring your resources and
mhm,
like, it's madness is a lot more damaging in effect.
mhm,
But with the leveling scheme and the resetting of abilities, which
yeah,
still happens upon long rests, it kind of becomes trivialized to some degree.
sure.
Um, do I
Especially
think?
in like con play. I
Yeah,
suppose
so
like in a homebrew play, you could keep track of that stuff
a little more
a
aggressively,
little
but
bit more. Yeah.
like once you hit level 9 as a cleric, which is a few adventures after, like you're if you're playing this in a series, you'll be level 5 already with the new AL rules.
Yeah.
And then you'll immediately almost jump up to 6, and then you only need a few more levels to get to 9. And if you're an acolyte, if I remember correctly, you can just get free spellcasting services.
Mhm.
So like, oop boop, greater restoration, like so like I,
They just
old AL, I think, had a lot more interest in this because it was an experience-based platform versus
mhm,
a checkpoint-based platform, because
yeah.
the crawl from like 4 to 5 was a pain,
Right.
and then 5, and then like the experience and even gold bumped up a bit,
Mhm.
where like you're in tier 2 much longer, and leveling becomes so much more difficult
Mhm.
because of the volume of experience required just to get to level to level to level.
Mhm.
And now when it's like 1 or 2 mods can get you from 5 to 6, 6 to 7, 7 to 8,
Yeah.
your character doesn't last really that long. And if you're a DM, it's like, I'm not playing at level 5.
Right.
Like I'm not doing that. It has zero interest to me.
Sure.
So, I mean, Madness in and of itself, compared to the season 4 stuff, which was just horror checks, and if you
Mhm.
failed, it was like a cumulative result versus it
Mhm.
could be fixed.
Sure.
I don't know where
And
that balance
maybe
would
that's an
be.
adjustment, right? Like maybe that's them recognizing this madness mechanic in season 3 didn't have enough teeth.
And
Because
but
the
that's the
horror checks are pretty aggressive in season 4 and have real consequences.
once again, I think it still comes down to the idea that you have um you have the ability to remove them, but
Hmm.
madness checks can get out of control.
Hmm.
Like you just start punching your neighbor. It's like they get real rough real
Yeah,
fast.
and like the consequences of failing them are like for 10 minutes you do a weird thing and then you don't do that weird thing anymore. So like
But then
if it
when it
happens,
bumps up to like,
yeah,
the next
long
level, but
term
which
and yeah,
which is
indefinite.
like still a few fails
Yeah.
along the way.
But the problem with that is like either it happens before a combat and somebody has to sit out that combat because they have madness for 10 minutes, or it happens at the end of a combat and it doesn't mean anything
Yeah.
because the party just like waits around for 10 minutes and it's over, you know.
I would almost prefer there either be more aggressive madness checks,
Hmm.
making madness, once again, this is jumping the foregone conclusion of core mechanics of this game,
Right.
but either doing that, changing the DCs of these
Hmm.
to make them more, as you said, have them more teeth, or like there's less requirements to get to the next level.
Yeah.
Make them either more plentiful, which then it becomes more obstructive in the game,
Hmm.
or higher DC checks and you can't get rid of them,
Sure.
or you need like a much more aggressive, like once you get an infinite madness or a definite madness, then you can cycle back down to 0,
Yeah.
or something along those lines.
Or you know the spells that remove them remove one of the checks rather than all of them. Yeah, I could see
Or resets the
any of
level,
those.
like it
Yeah.
pulls you back down to like, if you're at level 1 and 7 fails or whatever
Yeah.
the fail level is, it brings you back down to like 1,
Yeah. Yep.
but it just wipes the whole thing instead, which
Yeah. I think that's probably a better approach. Um, I don't know. Madness is one of those things that never seems. it
a
seems
problem
like
until it
well,
happens.
I mean, it seems like one of those things, and I mean it in general with the system. It seems like one of those things that like was a good concept that was poorly implemented, which is why it's an optional rule. You know, it's not. It's in the DMG is like, if you feel like incorporating this, I guess go for it. You know.
In the with these mods, they have half-page sidebars about it,
Yeah.
which is even more annoying. It's like,
Yeah.
we know you want this to be important, AL,
Right.
but it's
But it
not.
just isn't. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Either way.
Anyway, in conclusion, in the end, the demons are likely to make a narrow escape. The party likely will evade the guards and can offer information they've learned to their faction contacts. Factions are a little bit rough, you know. They're pretty limited in current Adventures League play. That said, they can still exist, right? I think we've talked about this in the past, the notion that, like, just because you're not a member of a faction doesn't mean those factions don't exist. Maybe they're just not recruiting, I don't know.
They're doing freelance work.
Yeah, more or less. There are small faction missions in this module that are worth reading through if you have faction members with the one background that allows them to be relevant. But there's just not reward structure for them in AL at this point to be, you know, useful.
We all hope for the good retooling eventually.
Yeah. So there it is, DDAL 3-12, Hillsfar Reclaimed. Thank you so much for listening to advice to streamline and renovate your tables. Be a good neighbor, give us a thumbs up, and subscribe. Toll the Dead for notifications. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon. And from now, until the next time, roll together.